to know some of the parts because we need to set up guidelines. We're going to be focusing on the breakpoint, the extension, and we're going to start by drawing the lapel, the fall, and this whole area up here. So let's get started. Started on the blazer. As always, we are going to open our start file. And the one thing we need to do also is reset the round as our default. So to do that, we're going to hold on to the round graphic style, hold down the Option key, and drag it on top of the default. And that will change the default. So now when we use it, we'll get round corners. And we could test that out by either drawing a shape, I hate when this opens, or we can just look at the stroke file, set it back to butt caps and mitered corners. And if I hit D on my keyboard, it should jump back to the round ones, which it does. So we are set and good to go. Before we start drawing, it's really important to create some guidelines, and that's why I showed you the diagram in the previous video. So let's go ahead and do that. We need to drag out a guide and place it where we want the breakpoint to be. And I'm going to do it about here. This is something that's flexible from blazer to blazer. As the designer, you would make this decision. And now we can go ahead and draw the guide for the extension. We're going to grab the pen tool. I like to use no fill, a red stroke, and I like it to be a thin stroke, so I'm going to make this 0.25. That way it's not very distracting on the page when you start drawing. We're going to start up on the neckline. We're going to go across the center line to the guide we just placed, and this is creating the extension. And then hold the Shift key and click just down below where your blazer is going to end. And that's the guide. We're going to select that and reflect it to the other side. So O to reflect, Option or Alt key on the guideline, vertical, copy, and now we have our guides in place. We can label this layer guides. Important to lock the layer so it doesn't move when we're working. And now that our guides are in place, we can create a new layer, reset our default colors with the D key, and start drawing the lapel. So let's grab the pen tool, zoom in a little bit, and I will go over the process for drawing the lapel. With the pen tool, we are going to start at the breakpoint. We're going to go up to the neckline for the second click, shoulder, and then we're going to create the notch, and then close the path. Now, the notch, again, kind of designer's choice. You can place it where you want. If you're not happy with where you drew it, not a problem. Grab the white arrow, and you can select it, and with your arrow keys, move it up, move it down, or you can grab an individual point and move it in or out according to your taste. So it's very easy to adjust. Now we need to finesse this a little bit. Let's get our pen tools open again and just move this over here so they're easy to access. Grab the anchor point tool. I'm going to curve the lapel piece, and I'm going to curve this inner piece here so it looks like it wraps around the body a little bit more. And I'm going to curve this a little bit too. I'm going to click near the top and drag it out. And then I can click on the bottom handle and drag it down a little bit so I get this nice curve going around the shoulder. You can curve this a little bit too if you like. And if you want to have a rounded corner, all you need to do is grab the white arrow, select the anchor point, and go ahead and drag the corner rounder in a little bit. I don't want to do that for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and undo, right? Command Z, and let's move on. The next thing I need here is a line. I am going to click and release, grab the pen tool again, and we're going to draw a little line that goes from this anchor point up to the roll line here. And that's where the seam is going to be for the construction of this whole area. I'd like to add stitches, so we're going to select just the outer part. I'm going to go up to Object, Path, and we're going to offset the path. Remember, a negative number offsets to the inside, so we're going to type in -1, and let's preview this just to make sure it's doing what we want. Click OK, and I'm going to go to my graphic styles and click on Stitches. Now there's a funny little point here. We can remedy that by grabbing the white arrow, selecting the anchor point, and using the corner rounder to just pull this back a little bit so it looks nice. And we'll release. Now, since we don't want stitches all the way around here, we need to delete the pieces we don't need. I find it easiest to start at this upper anchor point and hit delete, and then hit delete on the next point. We want our stitches to start here, so this works out nicely. We'll move down to the bottom, and our stitches should end here, so we're going to click on this anchor point, and whoops, I clicked in the wrong place. Sometimes that happens. We want to catch this anchor point and hit delete. So now I've got my stitches in the right place, and that takes care of one half of the lapel. I can go ahead, switch to the black arrow, select the whole thing, and group it together. Now I'm going to reflect it to the other side, so O to reflect, Option click on the center guide, vertical, copy, there's the other half. And last, down here, we have one more thing to do. We don't need this little piece sticking out, it's going to get in the way. So I am going to select both pieces. We're going to go to the Shape Builder tool, and let's turn off the tip here. We are going to hold down the Option or Alt key, because remember that will delete with the Shape Builder tool. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this little piece that's sticking out and delete the stitches that go with it. And now we have our lapel. We just need to do the back of the neckline. So this is done very much like the collar of the shirt. We're going to take the white arrow and select this piece, hold the Shift key and select this piece. We're going to copy, Command C, release, and then paste in back, Command or Control B, right click, join, right click, join. And that takes care of the back collar. We're going to grab the anchor point tool and curve it up just a little bit and curve this up just a little bit. And that takes care of the back neckline. Now, usually there's a seam across here separating the collar stand from the collar. So we'll grab the pen tool and we're just going to draw one point here, hold the Shift key, another point here, and we can curve it with the anchor point tool. So it follows the line of our collar. Let's sort of split the difference a little bit. And it looks like this needs to come up a tiny bit to match. That looks pretty good. And that's the collar. So in the next video, we'll talk about how to draw the actual blazer. All right, now that we've completed the lapel, let's move on to the front of the blazer. We're going to grab the pen tool, and we're going to start in the same place on the break point. We're going to click on the break point. We're going to click up here, and notice what happened. It connected to the stitches and it turned this whole line into stitches. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to undo, Command Z, and undo one more time, I think. Get rid of that point. Let's go and lock the layer that the lapel is in, so it doesn't get in our way again. I'm going to make a new layer, and I want to drag this new layer beneath the lapel layer where it really should be, because we're going to draw the front of the jacket now and it should be underneath the lapel. So make sure we have the pen tool, and let's do this again. We're going to start at the break point. We're going to go up just sort of one click below the collar, shoulder. This time when we click under the arm, we want to go a little further under the arm, because it's a blazer. It needs to have more ease than a shirt so it can fit on top of a shirt. We're going to go down to where the blazer ends. This time though, we're going to go across the center line to our extension and up a little bit. And then we're going to go back to where we started and click in order to close the path. I'm going to hit D for default so we can restore that. Now the armhole on a blazer looks a little nicer if, instead of dragging it in like we've been doing for the shirts, we click on it and drag it out just a little bit. We want it to be a very subtle curve. We also want to curve the side of the blazer because I'm going to add princess seams. Here's the waistband. We're going to click above the waistband and drag in, and then we can grab the handle on the bottom and drag up. So we can make kind of a nice shape over here, and it's again up to you to decide how you'd like it shaped, but you can finesse it by dragging these handles back and forth. Maybe we'll move this out just a little bit. Now I'm going to switch to the white arrow, and I'd like to round this corner. So I'll do it by selecting the anchor point and dragging the corner rounder till I get a shape I like, and I think a little less, maybe there. That takes care of the basic shape of the front. Now let's go ahead and add a princess line. Back to the pen tool. I'm going to click kind of in the middle of the armhole, and then down here at the bottom. And notice what happened. Because I clicked on something that was selected, it added an anchor point. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to go ahead and release my selection and then try again. Grab the pen tool, click mid armhole, and you see I have the asterisk, so I know I'm drawing what I need to be. I'm going to go down to where the princess line ends and then shape it with the anchor point tool. We want a soft curve coming out of the armhole here. We don't want to do something like this. So we're going to keep that soft, and we can go ahead and sort of shape it down here. We definitely do not want to fill on this line, so let's remove the fill and make that a graphic style because we'll probably need it again later. So no fill. And the last thing we need to do is add stitches. So I'm going to click on this side of the jacket. We're going to go up to Object, Path, Offset Path, -1 point, click OK, click on our stitches, and now we're going to go in and delete the parts that we don't need. I'm going to zoom in to make it a little bit easier. So with the white arrow, I'm going to click on this corner anchor point and hit delete. I'm going to click on this corner and hit delete, and we'll just follow this line down and delete the stitches until we get to the hem line. So now we've got the stitches starting down at the hem, following this edge around and going up to the break point. And that's where it should be. Now that this is complete, we can group it together. Right-click Group, and we'll reflect it to the other side. So O to reflect, Option or Alt-click on the center guide, vertical, copy, and that takes care of the front part. Let's zoom back out. Cancel. It helps if you're actually in the zoom tool when you do that. Hold the Alt key to zoom out. And let's do this inner back portion now. We're going to use the Group Selection tool, which is with the white arrow, but it's the white arrow with a little plus sign. And release and select one side of the front, hold the Shift key and select the other side. We want to make sure that we don't select the princess lines or the stitches this time. And we're going to copy this. We're going to release it, and then we're going to paste in back, Command B or Control B. Now in this case, we have to go back to the Pathfinder. So while these are still selected, we're going to go Window, Pathfinder, and we want Pathfinder Unite, which is the first one. So let's click on that, and it united the two pieces into one shape. We can close this now. While this is still selected, we're going to right-click and isolate selected path so we can see it more easily. We're going to grab the Delete Anchor Point tool and delete this anchor point in the center, this anchor point in the center bottom, and these two anchor points here. And now we can shape this a little bit. We'll drag the bottom down and give it a nice little curve. And we're going to drag the top up so it matches the curve of the back collar. So we're going to put it right there. We can also add stitches to this. So we'll switch to the white arrow, select the bottom hemline, copy, paste in front, nudge it up a few clicks, and add stitches. And lastly, this needs to be gray since it's the back. And then we can right-click Exit Isolation Mode. Now you can see we have the inner back of the blazer ready to go. But this brings up another problem. Notice, whoops, want to zoom in, not zoom out. Notice these little pieces here that are showing. We shouldn't see them. So we're going to grab the anchor point tool, and we're just going to go ahead and curve this a little bit so that they're out of sight. And we're going to do the same on this side. In this case, these lines are no longer symmetrical, but it's okay. They're always going to be hidden by the lapel, so it's not going to be an issue. And that takes care of the front. In the next movie, we'll add the sleeves. All right, let's add the sleeves. The sleeves for a blazer are going to be a little bit different than the sleeves for the button-down shirt we did, and that's because the armholes are curved outward instead of inward. So what we're going to do is start with the white arrow and select the armhole. We're going to copy it, Command C. We're going to paste in back, Command B, and then with the pen tool, we're going to make sure to click on this corner anchor point. And you can see I'm getting a new line point there instead of a forward slash, meaning I'm connecting it. So to make sure we're clicking in the right place, let's go ahead and isolate this path. And now if I click on it, you can see I got the /. So we're going to continue and draw the sleeve. You can just follow the template and close. And then we can right-click and exit isolation mode. I want to put stitches on the bottom of the sleeve, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to zoom in. And with the pen tool, I'm just going to go ahead and draw them. But again, see how the path is selected? If I click, I'm going to add an anchor point, which is what I don't want to do. So I need to deselect and then grab the pen tool, and now I can draw and start a new path. We want this line to be parallel to the hem of the sleeve, and we'll click on stitches. Many blazers have two-piece sleeves, so let's go ahead and draw that. I'm going to hit return to release this, and with the pen tool, I'm going to click right here in the armhole and straight down the hem of my sleeve, and that takes care of the two-piece sleeve. And the sleeve is complete. Let's go ahead and select all the elements of the sleeve. And when I did that, look what happened. It selected this part of the blazer. I'm not sure why it did that. Let's try again. It must be because something is connected or grouped that I don't want to have grouped. So I'm going to release that and select each piece individually. Aha, this is the piece that is somehow connected. So let's see if it'll let me ungroup it. It did. Now I should be able to select all the pieces of the sleeve. But I just noticed that this is still a dashed line, and it shouldn't be. It should be a no-fill line because it's a seam and not stitches. So let's select the sleeve again, right-click, group, and we can reflect it to the other side. So let's hit O to reflect, Alt or Option click on the center guide, vertical, and copy. So now we have sleeves on both sides. Notice this line's a little bit thicker than this line, so I'm going to select this sleeve and just nudge it over a little bit with my arrow key. And that takes care of the sleeves. In the next movie, we'll add a few details. Now it's time to add some details to the blazer. Let's start at the top and work our way down. There should be a line of stitches directly beneath the collar stand seam. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And I can't because it's in the locked layer for the lapel. So let's unlock that, select it. I'm going to copy, paste in front, nudge it down, and give it stitches. Let's lock the lapel layer again and go back to the layer that has our jacket on it. The inner lining of the blazer usually has a pleat up here. So we're going to grab the pen tool and we're going to draw a little upside down V to indicate the pleat, like that. This should be no fill, and that's a little bit thick. So let's go to our stroke panel and change the line weight to 0.5, and also go down to the profile and select the first one to finesse it a little bit. Looks nicer that way. Moving down, we need to add buttons. Buttons are always drawn on the center, so we can go to our shape tools and grab the ellipse tool. We're going to start where the guidelines intersect. We're going to hold the Option key and the Shift key so we can draw a perfect circle from the center, and we're going to go ahead and draw our button. This has no fill right now because that was the last thing we clicked on, so I'll hit D for default, make sure there's a fill on it. A button needs a buttonhole, so we'll switch to the pen tool. We're going to click right in the center of the button, hold the Shift key, and click the buttonhole extending outside of it. And again, this should be no fill. Let's go to our layers panel and make sure the buttonhole is dragged beneath the button. Select both the button and the buttonhole, and we'll right-click, group. And as I said in a previous video, buttonholes and buttons should be made into symbols. So let's open the symbols and add a new symbol, and we can call this blazer button. Now, to duplicate this, we really don't have to deal with the whole align and distribute because there's only going to be 3 buttons on this particular blazer. So what I can do is select this, hold the Alt key to make a copy, and the Shift key to keep it constrained. And I'm going to go ahead and drag it down to where I'd like the next button to be placed, maybe about here. And release the mouse first. And now I can just duplicate, Command D for duplicate, and it'll repeat the process I just did so it moved the button the same distance as the past button. So now we've got our buttons, and just a reminder that buttons should always be drawn on the center line. That's where buttons are, and that's why we have the extension here to cover that area so that our buttons can be always on center. Let's go to the zoom tool and zoom out a little bit by holding the Option key. And the last thing I'd like to add here are a couple of pockets. So the first pocket will be a welt pocket. Let's do that up here. And a welt pocket is very easy to draw. A single welt pocket is just a rectangle. So we're going to put that right there. We'll move down to the bottom and draw a pocket flap. Also very simple to draw. A pocket flap is just another rectangle. I want this angled a little bit, so I'm going to take my white arrow, release, select on the bottom line, or the bottom line segment, and I'm just going to arrow it over just a little bit so it's on a slight angle. You'll notice it has no fill at the moment because that was the last thing we used. So I'm going to select it and hit D for default to make sure that it's got a white fill. I'm going to add some stitches to this. So Object, Path, Offset Path, -1, OK. Let's click on our Stitches graphic style. And now group these two pieces together. I'll select them here from the Layers panel. Right-click, Group. And now I just want to rotate them into place. So I'll select this. Let's use the black arrow so we get the whole group. I'm going to hit R for Rotate. I'm going to click on this corner here, and I'm just going to pivot this down a tiny bit. Oops, it didn't hold my pivot point. See how it pivoted from the center? So let's Command Z. Let's try that again. R for Rotate. Click on my pivot point and pivot down. There we go. See how it pivoted from the point I was using? So that takes care of the pocket flap. I'm going to just nudge this over a tiny bit. I want it to really hit at the edge here. And the last thing I need to do is reflect this to the other side. So we'll select it, O to reflect, Option or Alt click on the guideline, copy. There's my pocket flap on the other side. And let's go ahead and zoom back out again. And that completes the front of the blazer. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and complete the back. Before we move on to the back, let's go ahead and group the buttons together. And remember, if you're using symbols, you don't have the option of right-click grouping, so we'll have to Command or Control G to group. And I want to show you a little sleeve trick. When we lay this out on the line sheet, the sleeves standing out so far sometimes take up a lot of space. So we can actually rotate them. I'm going to select the sleeve, click R for Rotate, click once on the shoulder to make it my pivot point, and just rotate the arm in a little bit. And now we notice a problem that the sleeve is actually in front. So we can remedy that very simply. We're going to delete this other sleeve so they're both rotated in the same direction. And to move this, we can actually right-click, arrange, and send to back, which is going to put the sleeve behind everything. So instead of moving it over here through the Layers panel, we can actually move it here. And now I'm going to reflect this back to the other side. So O to reflect, Option click on the center line, copy. And because this is behind everything, this should also stay behind everything. And now our jacket's just a little bit tighter and it's going to lay out better. Now that it's complete, we need to unlock the lapel layer, select the entire blazer, right-click, group, and we'll Alt drag it over or Option drag it over. And now we can turn this into the back. We'll double-click to go into isolation mode and delete all the elements we don't need. We don't need the buttons. We don't need any of the pockets. We don't need the lapels. We do not need the stitches and the line up here. We don't need the pleat. We don't need the front of the jacket. And we don't need these stitches here. We're going to turn the back of the jacket white by hitting default, and we're going to add a couple more details. We can actually leave the princess line here and just edit it a little bit. So let's start by adding a center back seam. It goes straight from the neck down to the bottom, and this should have no fill. And we're gonna add a vent to the back by clicking over here, and notice I'm getting the plus sign. So I'm gonna hold the shift key to get the asterisk, click a little bit of a diagonal, and then click straight down holding the shift key. We'll make this stitches. So that indicates that there's a vent on the back of the blazer. We're gonna go to the princess here. I'm gonna grab the white arrow, and I'm just gonna take this and bring it all the way to the bottom. And I don't want it quite as far out as the front, so I'm gonna move it over a little bit. And that looks pretty good, actually. It's a nice curve. So we will select it and reflect it to the other side. Since this is a two-piece sleeve, I want the seam on the back to be in a slightly different place. So I'm gonna take the white arrow, I'm gonna go ahead and select this, and I'm gonna move it over a bit. And then you might need to just adjust and make sure that this anchor point aligns with the hem of the sleeve, and this anchor point aligns up here with the princess line. And I still need to move this over a little bit. That looks a lot better. Let's go ahead and add the buttons to the sleeve. So we can zoom in over here. And this also gives us a better look here. You can see I didn't quite drag it down as far as I need to. So let's do that. And now we'll add some buttons. We're going to make new buttons because the ones on the sleeve are going to be smaller than the buttons that we use on the front. So we're going to hold the Alt and Shift key and make ourselves a little button. We'll change the stroke weight to 0.5. And I want to put 4 of these on the back. So I'm going to hold my Option and Shift key and drag a second button, and then duplicate, Command or Control D, and do it again. I'm going to group all these buttons together. Just like we did the placket on the shirt sleeve, I'm going to take these buttons, move them into place, click R for rotate, click in the center of the bottom button, and just rotate these into place. And there are the buttons on the sleeve. Let's zoom out. And I always find it easiest to just delete one sleeve and reselect and reflect the other sleeve. I think it's just faster. So I'm going to make sure that this is all grouped together because I added the buttons. And I'm going to take this. Look what happened here. Notice this pop back in front? It's because the buttons were on top, but again, we can remedy this by sending everything to the back when we're done with the sleeves. So we'll select the sleeve, O to reflect, Option click on the center guide, vertical, copy. And now if I select both sleeves, right click, arrange, send to back, it takes care of that situation. And now that our back is complete, we can right click and exit isolation mode. And there you have your blazer, front and back. We'll turn off the